Hey everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with upright and electric bassist Edmond Gilmore. Yay! Edmond, it's so great to have you here today. So glad you could find time in your busy schedule to chat with us. As always, we like to go to the past. How did you get started in music and particularly on bass?
Well, I'm coming from a family of, well, my father was a drummer. My mother was playing always amazing music at home. So we were always attracted to music since we were very young. My mother always brought the most versatile music. She would bring Stevie Wonder and she would bring Julio Iglesias and she would bring, Israeli singers because I'm from Israel. So, or Motown music. She loved everything. She really loved everything. French music, Enrico Macias, Serge Gainsbourg, everything. We heard every type of music at home. Arabic music, of course, because my origin is from Morocco. So we would listen to, this ancient Moroccan music, which is Arabic, and, Egyptian music, Farid El-Atrash from Egypt. So I really was exposed to music from a very young age to a lot of styles, a lot of everything. So, and one day I remember my older brother. He was struggling between buying a keyboard and guitar, and I said, "Why don't you get a guitar?" I was like, I think I was 10, and he listened to me. I don't know. He listened to his young brother. He said, "Okay, you know what? I'll take a guitar." And then my middle brother followed him, and he started playing guitar, and I started playing guitar too. I started as a guitar player until I was. From the age of 12 until 16, I played, or 15, I played guitar. And then one day, I was in this prom of junior high school, and they were playing this band. It's a very known band in Israel, and they're still kicking ass. They're called Machina. And the bass player, who is a very good friend of mine today, was playing this. Let me get the bass quickly and demonstrate this. He was playing this amazing bass part, which blew up my mind. I was just standing in the stadium, like, what? I want to play bass. It was like something like that that just awake my speakers. There was something like that. As soon as we get the sound, yeah, there you go. It was playing. Plays a lot with a pick, and I was like, ooh, I like this sound. And he has another song that goes like, so it was very like, the bass parts. It wasn't about soloing, it was about playing bass. Then I came to my middle brother and I said, I kind of like the bass. It sounds so good to me, and maybe I should take a bass. I said, you know what? Okay, I can help you because I got a friend who's got an old Hofner solid body bass. I think I can get you this bass. And I said, great. So I took the bass, and then he gave me a cassette. I was born in the 70s, so, we weren't into the digital world. So he gave me a cassette, a mix cassette of Level 42. And then, I heard Marking for the first time, and it's like, when a little bird opened its eyes, and the first thing he sees, he knows that it's his mother.
Yeah.
And I thought that's the way to play bass, go like all this stuff. And I said, okay, I should probably play bass like that. So I started obsessively listening to Level 42. And like I said, it was in the 80s, so it was kind of hard to get music. It's not like today that you can just buy and browse whatever you want on the internet. I had to get a record from the record store. And slowly by slowly, I started picking up more songs. I didn't have money for teachers back then. And the rest is history. I got into the bass, and I was completely fall in love with that. And then later on, I was following other bands like, of course, Weather Report. Jocko was one of the following bass players. Everybody told me you should check Jocko, and we'll get to that. But I remember the first time I heard his album, I was like, what is that weird sound? The fretless and Donna Lee. And what's going on there? And so this is how I got into that. And that's it. And it was fun and it was a nice ride, and I enjoy this ride until today.
Nice, nice. Well, and am I understanding that you're pretty much self-taught for most purposes?
I am, like Jocko said that in his video, I'm officially self-taught.
There we go. There we
Even
go.
though I went to music school at some point, but for classical music, I was studying in Jerusalem Academy of Music, and then I transferred myself to Tel Aviv School of Music, but I was playing upright bass. I'm talking about classical with a bow, with a bow tie, playing with orchestras. Nothing for the electric though, but I'm self-taught.
Nice. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the diversified, I call it the diversified musical portfolio you have, because you are obviously comfortable with electric, but again, you've played with the Israeli opera, and you're obviously like rock and hard stuff. But on the same token, you're into jazz as well. You've played with Mike Stern quite a bit.
Mike Stern and Randy Brecker. I played with a lot of cats that I used to see them on the magazine. I was like, oh, they were my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially Randy Brecker. He played, it's Michael Brecker's brother, and that's the greatest saxophone player ever lived. Of course, it was an honor, and these guys were kicking my ass all the time. But yeah, I got into jazz mainly because of a couple important people in my life. One of them, of course, naturally, needless to say, was Mike Stern, who really took me to the level I am today. Of course, I still see myself with a long road ahead of me to keep going on and on and on as much as possible. But yeah, I had a good friend of mine. We were doing the Dancing with the Stars show in Israel for 7 seasons, and there was a phenomenal saxophone player, one of the pioneers in Israel. His name is Peter Wertheimer, who passed away, unfortunately, in 2020. But he got me into jazz. He said, look, I can see you're a very talented guy, and I can see you have a foot in jazz, but you're not there all the way. Let me come over to my place. It was like he took me under his wing, and he's one of the greatest saxophone ever lived here, and phenomenal musician. He played every baritone, alto, soprano, flute, clarinet, just to name a few. He was phenomenal. So these two guys sucked me into the jazz world like hard. Yeah.
Nice. And do you find, because there's such a distinct musicality between kind of in the extremes, have you found a way to kind of make them, I'm going to say, compatible? Because again, a lot of times, classical musicians will kind of play one way, and then jazz musicians are kind of cutting loose in a whole other direction, and then kind of balancing the two, where you can't really do classical music too jazzy. I suppose you could, but people might go, oh, what are you doing?
Right.
It's kind of complicated that way.
There's a great movie. I think it's called Crossroads, with Steve Vai is the guy there. It's an old movie with Ralph Muchel from, I think it's 1986, when he was still doing Karate Kid movies. And he's playing this prodigy child who's playing classical guitar, and he's in Juilliard. And then, have you seen this movie by any chance?
I don't think I have.
It's a great movie. I really recommend that. But he loves playing blues, but we're talking about Mississippi blues, like Robert Johnson and all these. That's his heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, he's a child prodigy in Juilliard, and he's playing all this crazy, complicated pieces in music. And he plays this, there's a scene in the movie where he plays, I always like to go to this example, he plays like, and then in the end, he's like sliding blues. And the teacher, it's like classical music teachers. They're like, Daniel, his name's Daniel, is in the Karate Kid movie. So they ask him like, you should know you cannot serve two masters. So, and that line kind of clicked, and I remember saying to myself, because I played upright, but I mean, I'm a dedicated person, So as for your question, now I'm going to answer. I think when you do classical music, you have to go all the way in. I kind of ditched the electric bass for almost 10 years, from the age of, let's say, 24 until 33,
Mhm.
34. I really ditched the electric bass. I would just play like when I was needed, but I wasn't devoted again to the electric bass. I completely ditched it. Take it out once in a while just to keep in shape. But I was like working in classical music, techniques, methods, everything. Working with the bow. I barely played pizzicato. Like I didn't play much jazz.
Mhm.
It was just classical, and I did find a great advantage doing that because I saw a lot of jazz musicians that had a lot of holes in their technique, in their pitch, in their tone. So a lot of people like to skip and go to play jazz on the instrument
Mm.
upright. It's a very unforgiving instrument. Like if you mess up
Oh yeah.
a little, train wreck. So for me, it was being dedicated. And I love classical music. I think classical music is the real deal.
Mhm.
And when I went back to the jazz, I just completely ditched the upright bass. I did. This is when I really started playing pizzicato, but I really ditched it. So of course you can cross over and do this and that,
Mhm.
but I think if you want to play really good jazz, you have to learn classical music, but not the other way around.
Nice. Well, and especially because you also mentioned that you started on guitar, and one of the things that very common, it is a very common place for a lot of bass players to start. But one of the key things is, in order to play bass, you have to stop thinking like a guitar player because
Yeah,
you're trying to fill in too much. You're trying to, manage it in a whole different way. So again, I can imagine I'm in classical mode or I'm in jazz mode. And then
yeah,
to add to that, you have such exposure to world music and you start adding the Middle Eastern tonalities and notes between notes and tempos and time signatures and things. It turns into a real swirl of stuff. So it's got a lot of challenges there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's look. There's a lot of magic in the jazz music. There's there's a lot of giants in this world, and it's all great. But classical music for me is like an endless road.
Mm-hmm.
In jazz, it's like, when you learn to play bebop, you
Hmm.
got to know the licks of bebops. It's like you learn a language, right? If I'm going to learn Portuguese, so eu quero falar português o tempo todo, mas não é fácil. I learn a sentence, boom, I got this sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So if you learn to combine these sentences, it's great. But I mean, classical music, if you just think about, the timeline, when you started, let's start from the Baroque music, and then it was the Rococo, the Baroque, and then you had the classical era, and then you had the Romantic era, and then you had the modern and the postmodern, and then you have the dodecaphonic music, and it keeps going crazier and crazier. Sometimes some stuff sounds to me like too much,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I think jazz is starting to go that way. Like, I hear a lot of experimental music, and it's all good, but I'm not into that. I'm into communicating with the audience,
Mm-hmm.
because I was in a few concerts in my life that I was like, okay, I gotta leave because I just embarrassed. It's too much. I
Yeah.
was like, it's with all the respect, I understand it's art, but I can also throw like paints on the like some colors on a canvas and say that's music. That's art. It's not.
No.
Art is like when you really think about it and not express your anger. if I may. Sorry if I may sound too harsh on that, but that's my opinion. So I think classical music has a much more rich world, given the fact that it has like periods of time that it just changes. So jazz, we had the bebop, and then we had the modern jazz, which was more modal, like when Miles started with that and Coltrane. To tell you that I'm crazy about modern jazz, I'm not sure. You know, so that's what I think pretty much about this whole thing. But it's just me, you know. I mean, some people are crazy about this stuff, and it's totally cool.
There you
Totally
go. You go. Well, and it is an interesting perspective, especially, you know, in the eyes and the ears of the beholder. And doing what we do, I'm exposed to lots of all kinds of genres of music. And I've actually learned to appreciate some things that I never would have thought I would. And I'm going, oh, well, look, there's some interesting things there, you know.
Right.
But admittedly, the same way, like you mentioned, the paint on the canvas. We go see a Jason Pollock, and you're kind of going, that's a drop cloth. That's not, not
Right, exactly.
but it's $1 million piece of art according to them. So it's all, you know, in the eye of the beholder. Now,
Exactly.
sound-wise, because you have such a diversified musical portfolio, how are you getting your sound? What are you playing on to achieve, you know, what you're trying to get there?
Since I specifically when I started playing with Mike, you talking about finger sound?
Well, and instruments, finger sound.
Well, a lot of change since I played with Mike. I got to be honest, my preferences has changed dramatically because, you know, I remember I used to come to his place in the first few months, and, you know, we were playing blues, and, you know, I would play like a walking bass, you know, with this kind of Jocko-ish sound. And one day he kind of had enough, and he said, stop. Listen, when I'm here, you're always here. Not here, definitely not here. And I remember when he said that, it was how do you call this moment? A moment of epiphany. And I said, Mike, I got to go home. So what happened? I said, we were neighbors. I got to go home because I need to think about what you said, because it all of a sudden clicked. And I went home and I started listening to Ray Brown, which I listened a lot, and Paul Chambers and all these cats, and listening to Upright, and start thinking about, like, you know, what's going on there. And of course, Anthony Jackson was huge inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I really heard that when the band is playing, they're always there, supporting the bottom, like really supporting the bottom.
Yeah.
And, you know, I came the day after, and the sound I wanted to get was a lot softer, and you know, to do my job as a bass player. And I immediately started doing what Anthony does, which is muting the sound, and I started playing like. And it started to swing. So this is very flashy, you know. You're like a hero. Wow. Yeah. So your sound is like out there. Everybody hears every note you play, but you're like interrupting people playing, you know?
Mm.
And when I was like, and I remember I played few notes, and Mike said, stop. What happened? I said, what do you mean? I said, you're playing different since yesterday. I said, because your fault. You told me to play different. I thought about it, and boom. So now I'm going to answer your questions. When I think about sound, I think about how do I make the band sound better? How do I make the guy I play with sound better? So I play a lot of mutes now, like you heard.
Mm-hmm.
When I play bass, like I don't really play anymore, like, you know, the bridge sound very, you know, burpy. Like I'm playing. If I would play it, I would like, you know, close the tone down, but I would like to have something more. Of course, I'm going to listen to the guy who's playing with me, and I will fit myself, but I'm always going to be there. So I'm always tweaking the sound, but it's not about me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the sound I'm looking for is how to make the band sound killing. And sometimes it could be, slappy and funky. And I play a lot less notes today.
Ah.
A lot less notes when it comes to comping. Yeah.
Nice. And gear-wise, if I remember correctly, I've seen some F basses in your hands.
That's old videos. I love F basses. They're great basses, really. George Forlanetto is a wonderful luthier. I was fortunate enough to try probably every instrument in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I tried them all. I had every bass you can probably think of, starting from Fenders to Alembics, everything in the middle. I played on F bass for about, from 2007 until 2015 or 16. And then I moved to Fender, to be honest.
Gotcha.
I'm a huge fan of Fender, so I'm playing mainly jazz basses.
Mm-hmm.
Or these PJ phenomenal basses. I love them. This is a 90s basses. I got another one here. I just find Fender to be, like if there's a spectrum of colors, it fits. Every time I hear a bass, even a bass that is trying to sound like a Fender, it's of course, there's great stuff there, like Sadowski guitars. Lakeland, I heard, I got a good friend, Mike Visiglia, has got a great old Joel Osborne model. But I'm into 4-strings, and I'm into Fenders more than everything today. Because, look, F-Bass makes kind of a Fender style.
Yes.
So if you really want to play a Fender, just play a Fender. You know what I mean? Like, sure, you want to play 5-string, you want to play 6-string, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But into 4-string, I think Fender is the one that nailed it. And it works for me. I mean, some people like other stuff. I totally get it. I got a lot of friends who, I brought to F-Bass a couple of artists. Timur Fell, he played with Yama, and then I told him, you should come with me to F-Bass, and he still plays them today. And he sound great on them, and he loves them, and they're amazing instruments. But for me, I feel like Fender is what I like. And recently, I joined Music Man. Actually, they're supposed to send me a couple of instruments. Just came up with a retro, which is an incredible instrument. I tried it at the store. I called them and said, guys, I would love to use. What can we do? He said, Edmond Gilmore, we heard about you. Let's a couple of basses. So they're going to be nice enough to send me a couple of basses. I ordered 2 basses. They're going to come any given day. And it's just amazing to me because it's that's the instruments that they came up with now. Those instruments they came out now is phenomenal because they kind of continuing the production of the 70s. It doesn't say Ernie Ball anymore. It's just Music Man, like the old school. I love Music Man because it's also a Fender in a way.
Yes.
It's not in a way, it's a Fender, but these instruments, they have their own unique sound. They don't try to sound like a jazz bass or a P bass. It's kind of an evolution of Fender. And he had this vision to come up, with the active electronics, and it's just sound phenomenal. And I love those instruments, Yeah.
Well, and in your sound chain, you have a preference in a particular instrument cable?
No. I just use whatever.
Gotcha.
Good stuff. I use clots. I use what else? I mainly good stuff that I get.
Gotcha.
I don't put much of details on that. Strings, I can tell you for sure. I'm using DR Fat Beans.
Okay.
But it looks like between us, I'm probably gonna use Ernie Ball strings as well. Probably 2. Because they're great also. And maybe it's time for a change because I've been with DR for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then amplification-wise?
Mark bass. First of all, they are amazing people, really. They take care of their artists in a way that I cannot even imagine. Really, they love their artists, and they do everything for their artists, which is amazing. And the amp sounds unbelievable. I love it. You can get any sound you want from that. From a slap tone, I like to slap a lot, in a very warm, kind of a jazzy tone, and they're just awesome. It's clear, it's right in the face, and it's loud when you need. And it's really important for me, the relationship with the company. And they are absolutely at the top when it comes to taking care of their artists.
In my experience, I've had a lot of exposure with Mark bass artists, and what you're mentioning is very true. Again, the family feeling that you get with Mark bass, but also the versatility of sound. That
Yes.
There's people that play jazz and they can use Mark bass. There's people that play rock that can use Mark bass, and everything in between. And a lot of times they just want to get the cleanest, crispest sound possible, and then they can get that to like front of house and let somebody else manage the rest of it.
This is, for me, look, I took this amp, any stage I was in, every part of the world. I'm talking about Japan, Australia, of course, New York, in Europe. Everywhere I took it, I found a great sound. Unlike other amps that I played before, I must mention, I always, like, if I would go to a certain venue or a club, it will sound all of a sudden different, And Mark bass just works like magic, It works like magic, and this is unbelievable to me, because Mark bass is, they really nailed it. These guys, I don't know how they did it, because it's a pretty simple amp, it's a digital amp.
Mm-hmm.
But whoever planned this amp, Marco or the Virgilis, he knows what musician needs, and that's very important. Like, to know what musician needs, and it's just really great stuff that I always enjoy. I start using them since they had I still have it here, the classic 300. There's a real amp tube.
I think everybody that I've ever talked to that has used Mark bass has been extraordinarily impressed. You mentioned you've got the big one. I also have noticed that they've put a lot of effort into reducing weight, that especially for a lot of the musicians that, like, if you live in the big city and you don't want to carry, you don't have roadies to carry, an 8x10 around behind you,
Yes.
it comes in, very handy. So that said, we should probably talk about the future a little bit. What plans do you have in the future? What's in the works?
I'm working on my solo album for the first time in my life. I'm a kind of late bloomer.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working on my album. I think, pretty much everything together. I just need to rearrange the whole things. And you know how it's like when you write an album. You start thinking, oh, is that good enough? Maybe it's shit. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. So you think about it and you mind about it. You wonder if it's like the right thing to write, and then you change, and then you change again, and then you change. So I'm in this phase, but I'm working on my solo album. That's the main project I'm busy with. I'm kind of inspired. I talked to Alan Altsworth once a long time ago, and I said, "Are you gonna perform there?" They said, "No, I'm working on my solo album, so I'm just doing that." And I was thinking, that sounds about right, like you need to be focused. And that's it, and I decided to do it like this. So I do like a tiny project. I just played with Mike in New York a few days ago. We haven't played for a while, so I called him and we were like playing for 4 days in a row. And it was just, just for fun. But, I also wanted to play for him my music, and he liked it and all of that. So it was great. Yeah, it's coming up together nice. And I think it's going to be a good album. I really think it's going to be a good album, because it's very nice music. It's very light. It's very simple. I'm not trying to aim to anything that is too crazy, just something that is going to be light for people to listen to. And if that's going to work, that's going to be fine, you know. It's going to be a cool music for sure. It's going to be funky and it's going to be jazzy. There is a little bit of classical music there, tiny beat. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be cool. I really think it's going to be cool.
Nice. And if people want to find out more about where they can find this and know what you're up to, where's the best place for them to look?
Instagram probably would be the best, because my Instagram is dedicated just for my professional life.
Gotcha.
I don't do sometimes I do hey, I just had this burger. You should try it too. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to do this for now. I'm trying to really, focus on my project, on my sound, on my stuff, and see how it goes, just to see how it goes. But I think it's going to be really good project, because there's going to be a lot of great musicians on it. A lot of great musicians. There's going to be Dennis Chambers on it. There's going to be Mike is going to play on it, obviously. Randy hopefully would be on it. Maybe Weckel would be on it. So I put by the way, I put on Instagram a little bit of demos, so people can listen a little bit. I think it's nice. It's you can find few. I think I put 4 teasers, but it's not. It's funky music, I really prefer to play really good groove music and to play bass. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, I'm not going to solo that much there. It's going to be music,
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, it gives us something to look forward to. Edmond, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. And we've been rolling with a few little technical difficulties here, but we've got our way through it. So
I'm sorry. My phone's temperature.
No worries. But anyway, folks, you've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine, Edmond Gilmore.
Great.